Sometimes the most innocent favor can unravel someone's entire life. And I never imagined that simply helping a friend during her recovery would lead to witnessing the complete destruction of what seemed like a perfect marriage. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I accidentally became the catalyst for my best friend's divorce. Though looking back now, I realize I was merely holding the match when their house of cards was already soaked in gasoline. It all started on a humid Tuesday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, when my phone buzzed at 6:30 with a text from my friend Emma. She'd just given birth to her first child the day before through an emergency cesarean section after 28 hours of labor that had exhausted her both physically and emotionally. The text was brief but urgent, asking if I could come to the hospital as soon as possible because she needed my help with something important. Emma and I had been friends since our college days at UNC Chapel Hill, where we'd bonded over late-night study sessions and our mutual love of true crime podcasts. She was 32 now, married to Marcus for 5 years, and they'd been trying for a baby for the last 3 of those years, going through 2 miscarriages that had tested their relationship in ways they never expected. When I arrived at the hospital, the maternity ward was buzzing with the quiet energy of new life and exhausted parents. I found Emma in room 314, looking pale but radiant in that way new mothers sometimes do, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink and white striped blanket. Marcus wasn't there, which struck me as odd since he'd been so involved throughout the pregnancy, attending every appointment and reading every parenting book he could get his hands on. Emma smiled weakly when she saw me, gesturing for me to come closer while putting a finger to her lips to indicate we should speak quietly. "Sarah, thank God you're here," she whispered, shifting the baby slightly in her arms. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to promise you won't ask too many questions right now." Her green eyes, usually so bright and confident, looked troubled despite the joy of holding her newborn daughter. I sat down in the visitor's chair beside her bed, noticing how she kept glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in at any moment. The baby made a small sound, not quite a cry, but more like a gentle protest at being jostled, and Emma's face softened as she looked down at her daughter with such love it made my heart ache. "Of course, Em, whatever you need," I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand gently. Her fingers were cold despite the warm room, and I could feel them trembling slightly. She reached over to the bedside table with her free hand, pulling out a manila envelope that had been tucked under her water pitcher. The envelope was sealed with clear tape, and I could see her handwriting on the front in the purple ink she always used, a habit from our college days when she insisted it helped her remember things better. "I need you to take this to the courthouse and file it today," she said, pressing the envelope into my hands. "It's the baby's birth certificate. I've already filled everything out, and it just needs to be officially filed." I must have looked confused because she quickly continued. "Marcus is dealing with his mother right now. She flew in from Seattle this morning, and she's having some kind of crisis about not being here for the birth. He'll be tied up with her all day, and this needs to be filed within 72 hours. The thing is, Sarah, and this is really important, you cannot let Marcus see this envelope or know that you're filing it. He's very particular about paperwork and documentation. You know how he is. And if he finds out I sent you instead of waiting for him, he'll insist on redoing everything himself. We'll miss the deadline while he triple checks every detail." Something in her tone made me pause. Emma and Marcus had always seemed like such a solid couple, the kind that made decisions together and supported each other through everything. The way she was talking about him now, with this mixture of frustration and something else I couldn't quite identify, felt different from her usual loving exasperation with his perfectionist tendencies. "Are you sure everything's okay?" I asked, trying to read her expression. This seems like more than just Marcus being uptight about paperwork. Emma's jaw tightened for a moment before she forced herself to relax, looking down at the baby again. "It's been a really hard pregnancy, Sarah. Harder than I let on to most people. Marcus has been wonderful in many ways, but he's also been incredibly controlling about every little detail. What I eat, when I sleep, which doctors we see, what we buy for the nursery. He even wanted to pick out my hospital gown because he read some article about how the color could affect the baby's first visual impressions. I'm exhausted. I just pushed a human being out of my bayou. And I need this one thing done without having to justify every decision to him." The baby started to fuss then, and Emma shifted her to the other arm with practiced ease that surprised me, given she'd only been a mother for about 16 hours. "Her name is already on there," she said quietly. "We discussed names for months, and I've made my choice. It's what I want, and I filled it out myself. Please, Sarah, just take it and file it. Don't open it. Don't let anyone else see it, especially not Marcus. Can you do this for me?" looking at my friend, pale and tired in that hospital bed, holding her miracle baby after years of trying. I couldn't say no. I tucked the envelope into my purse, gave her a careful hug that wouldn't disturb the baby, and promised I'd take care of it. As I was leaving, she called out softly, "The courthouse opens at 9. There's usually a line, so you might want to get there early. And Sarah? Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." The drive to the courthouse gave me too much time to think. The envelope sat in my purse on the passenger seat like it contained state secrets instead of a simple birth certificate. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation than Emma was telling me. Marcus had always been intense. That was true. He was a software engineer who approached life like it was code to be debugged and optimized. But he'd also been devoted to Emma, especially during their fertility struggles. I'd seen him hold her while she cried after the second miscarriage, promising they'd keep trying, that they'd have their family one way or another. The courthouse was an imposing brick building in downtown Charlotte. One of those structures that seemed designed to make regular citizens feel small and out of place. I arrived at 8:45, and there was already a line forming outside the Vital Records office. The August heat was already oppressive, making everyone in line irritable before the day had even properly begun. I stood there clutching my purse, very aware of the envelope inside, and tried to look like I knew what I was doing. The woman in front of me was there to get a death certificate for her mother, and she spent the entire wait telling me about the funeral arrangements and how her siblings were fighting over the inheritance. I made sympathetic noises while my mind kept wandering back to Emma in that hospital bed, the way she'd looked when she asked me not to ask questions. By the time the office opened and we all filed inside, I'd worked myself into a state of anxiety. What if they asked me questions I couldn't answer? What if there was something wrong with the paperwork? What if Marcus somehow found out what I was doing? The air conditioning inside was a blessed relief, but the fluorescent lights made everyone look sickly and suspicious. I took my place in line, now about 7th or 8th, and tried to look casual while my heart raced like I was committing some kind of crime. That's when I saw him. Marcus came rushing through the main courthouse entrance looking like he hadn't slept in days, which he probably hadn't. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and there was a wild look in his brown eyes as he scanned the lobby. When he spotted me, his whole body sagged with relief and he practically ran over, dodging around an elderly couple and nearly knocking over a potted plant in his haste. "Sarah, thank God," he said, breathing hard like he'd run all the way from the hospital. "Emma sent me to get you. She realized she made a mistake on the form and needs you to bring it back so she can fix it before filing." My stomach dropped. Emma had specifically said Marcus would be with his mother all day, that he wouldn't even know about this errand. The way he was looking at the purse hanging from my shoulder made my skin crawl. His eyes were locked onto it like he had X-ray vision and could see right through the leather to the envelope inside. "She didn't mention any mistakes," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She seemed pretty sure everything was filled out correctly." I shifted slightly, moving my purse to my other shoulder away from him and watched his jaw clench. The line moved forward one person and I moved with it, but Marcus stayed right beside me. So close I could smell the hospital soap still clinging to his skin mixed with stale coffee and desperation. "You don't understand," he said, lowering his voice and leaning in closer. "Emma's not thinking clearly right now. The hormones, the pain medication, the exhaustion, it's all affecting her judgment. She doesn't realize what she's doing. Just give me the papers and I'll take them back to her. We can sort this all out together, as a family." His hand moved toward my purse and I instinctively stepped back, bumping into the woman behind me who gave me an irritated look. "Marcus, Emma asked me to do this specific favor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If she wanted you involved, she would have asked you instead of me. I think you should go back to the hospital and talk to her about this." His face flushed red, and for a moment I thought he might actually grab my purse. But then he seemed to remember we were in a public place with security cameras and witnesses everywhere. He took a deep breath, running his hands through his hair in a gesture I'd seen him do 1,000 times when he was trying to solve a particularly difficult problem at work. "Look, Sarah, I know Emma's your friend, but I'm her husband. I'm the baby's father. Don't I have a right to know what name my daughter is going to carry for the rest of her life?" The question hung in the air between us, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't about the paperwork being perfect or Emma making a mistake. This was about the name. They must have disagreed about the name, and Emma had made a unilateral decision while Marcus was distracted with his mother. If you have concerns about the name, that's something you need to discuss with Emma, I said, moving forward with the line again. We were getting closer to the windows where the clerk sat behind bulletproof glass, looking bored and official. Marcus moved with me like a shadow, his presence oppressive in the small space. Other people in line were starting to notice our tense interaction, shooting us curious and uncomfortable glances. We did discuss it, Marcus said through gritted teeth. We agreed on a name months ago. We painted it on the nursery wall. I built custom shelves that spell it out. My mother embroidered it on a baby blanket. And now when I'm not there, when I can't even be part of the moment, she goes and changes everything? His voice was rising despite his efforts to control it, and I could see a security guard near the entrance starting to pay attention to us. Marcus, please, I said quietly. This isn't the place for this conversation. Go back to Emma, talk to her. But he wasn't listening anymore. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to shock me. Just let me see it, he said, his eyes wild. Just let me see what name she chose, that's all I'm asking. I deserve to know what my daughter's name is going to be. The woman behind me, the one I'd bumped into earlier, spoke up in a thick Southern accent. Sir, you need to let go of that young lady right now before I call for security. Her voice was loud enough to draw more attention, and suddenly it felt like everyone in the courthouse lobby was watching us. Marcus seemed to realize what he'd done and released my wrist immediately, stepping back with his hands raised like I'd been the one grabbing him. I'm sorry, he said, but his eyes never left my purse. I'm just so tired. We've been at the hospital for 2 days. I haven't eaten, haven't slept. I just want to know my daughter's name. Is that really so unreasonable? He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through photos frantically. Look at what I built for her. He shoved the phone in my face, showing me picture after picture of a beautiful nursery decorated in soft yellows and grays with stars and moons painted on the walls. And there, above the crib in wooden letters painted to match the decor, was the name Luna. Luna, he said, his voice breaking. We chose Luna together. It means moon. We called her our little Luna all through the pregnancy. Talked to her every night, putting my hand on Emma's belly and saying, "Good night, Luna, Daddy loves you." How can she just change that without even telling me? The raw pain in his voice made my chest tight, but I had made a promise to Emma. The line moved forward again, and now there were only 3 people ahead of me. Marcus was getting more agitated, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Please, Sarah, he said, and to my horror, his eyes were filling with tears. I'm begging you, just let me see what name she chose. If it's something we can live with, I'll walk away right now. I won't say another word, but if it's what I think it is, if she did what I'm afraid she did, then we need to stop this before it becomes official. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what name Emma could have chosen that would cause this level of panic in Marcus. Was it something offensive? Something that would embarrass their daughter? Or was this just about control, about Marcus not getting to make this decision? What name do you think she chose? I asked, genuinely curious now despite myself. Marcus's face went dark, his jaw clenching so hard I could see the muscles jumping under his skin. Jackson, he said, the word coming out like it physically hurt him. I think she named our daughter Jackson. The name meant nothing to me, but clearly it meant everything to Marcus. His whole body was tense with barely controlled rage, and I found myself taking another step back. Who's Jackson? I asked, though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know the answer. The line moved forward again, only 2 people ahead of me now. The elderly woman who defended me earlier was right behind us, watching with sharp eyes like she was ready to intervene again if necessary. Marcus laughed, but it was an ugly sound with no humor in it. Jackson was Emma's ex, the one who died in a motorcycle accident 2 years ago, the one she swore she was over, the one she promised meant nothing compared to what we had together. My blood ran cold. Surely Emma wouldn't name her daughter after a dead ex-boyfriend. That would be cruel beyond belief. But then I remembered the look in her eyes at the hospital, the way she'd insisted I not let Marcus see the paperwork, the tremor in her voice when she talked about needing this one thing done her way. Marcus, I don't think... I started, but he cut me off. You don't know her like I do, he said. You don't know how she's been since he died. The way she goes quiet on the anniversary. The way she keeps that photo of him hidden in her jewelry box, thinking I don't know about it. I've tried to be understanding. I've tried to be patient. But naming our child after him? That's not grief, that's sickness. The person at the front of the line finished their business and everyone moved forward. Only one person ahead of me now. My hands were sweating and I could feel the envelope through my purse like it was burning. Marcus must have sensed we were running out of time because he suddenly changed tactics. He pulled out his wallet and started rifling through it, pulling out bills. "How much?" he asked desperately. "How much to just let me look at it? 100? 500? I have more in the car. I can go to an ATM, just name your price." The security guard was definitely watching us now, his hand resting on his radio. "Marcus, stop," I said firmly. "This isn't about money. Emma trusted me to do this for her, and I'm going to do it. Whatever issues you two have, you need to work them out together. Not in the middle of a courthouse with me as some kind of proxy." But he wasn't listening. He was spiraling, muttering about betrayal and disrespect and how he'd given Emma everything. Supported her through the miscarriages, been there for her when Jackson died even though it killed him to comfort her while she grieved another man. The person ahead of me finished and suddenly I was at the front of the line. The clerk, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and elaborate braided hair, looked between Marcus and me with raised eyebrows. "Next," she called out, though she was already watching us warily. I stepped forward, my legs feeling like jelly, and Marcus stepped with me. "I'm the father," he announced to the clerk before I could speak. "That's my daughter's birth certificate she's filing. I need to verify the information is correct." The clerk looked at me, then at Marcus, then back at me. "Ma'am, did you fill out this paperwork?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, the mother filled it out. She asked me to file it for her while she recovers from her C-section." The clerk nodded slowly, still eyeing Marcus. "And is this gentleman authorized by the mother to review the documentation?" "No," I said at the same time Marcus said yes. The clerk sighed deeply, clearly used to this kind of drama. "Sir, unless your name is on the birth certificate as the father, or you have written authorization from the mother, I cannot allow you to review the document. Ma'am, if you could please provide the paperwork." My hands shook as I opened my purse and pulled out the envelope. Marcus made a sound like a wounded animal, his hand twitching toward it but stopping short of actually trying to grab it again. The security guard had moved closer, positioning himself where he could intervene quickly if necessary. I handed the envelope to the clerk, who took it with professional calm and began to open it carefully. "Please," Marcus whispered, leaning over the counter. "Please just tell me what name she chose. I'm her father. I have a right to know." The clerk ignored him, pulling out the form and reviewing it with practiced eyes. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of reaction. When she got to what must have been the name section, her eyebrows rose slightly and she glanced up at Marcus with something like sympathy in her eyes. "The birth certificate lists the mother as Emma Chen and the father as Marcus Chen," she said professionally. "Is that correct?" Marcus nodded frantically. Yes, that's us. That's me. What about the name? What name did she choose?" The clerk looked at me as if asking permission, and I found myself shrugging helplessly. This had already gone so far beyond what I'd expected when I agreed to this simple favor. The clerk turned the paper so Marcus could see it, though she kept it firmly in her own hands. I watched his face as he read whatever Emma had written in that purple ink. The color drained from his skin so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed several times like he was trying to speak but couldn't find words. Then his face flushed deep red and his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. "Jackson," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "She actually did it. She named our daughter Jackson." But then the clerk made a small correction. "Actually, sir, the name listed here is Jackson. Jaxon. Jackson Marie Chen." As if that spelling difference made any real difference to what Emma had done. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Marcus let out a sound that was part scream, part sob, and his fist slammed into the wall beside my head so hard that bits of drywall dust rained down on my shoulder. I froze in terror as he pulled back for another punch, but the security guard was already there, grabbing Marcus's arm and yanking him backward. "Sir, you need to calm down right now," the guard said firmly, while another guard appeared from somewhere and moved to stand between Marcus and me. "She's still in love with him," Marcus screamed, fighting against the guard's hold. He's been dead for 2 years and she's still in love with him. Our daughter, our miracle baby, and she names her after him. Tears were streaming down his face now, mixing with rage in a terrible combination. The entire courthouse lobby had gone silent, everyone watching this very public breakdown of what had probably looked like a perfect life from the outside. The clerk, bless her, had already started stamping the birth certificate with quick, efficient movements. She was making it official before anyone could stop her, before this could escalate any further. "Ma'am, here's your receipt," she said, handing me a small piece of paper while sliding the now official birth certificate into a new envelope. "The certified copies will be mailed to the address listed within 7 to 10 business days." The guards were moving Marcus toward the exit now, one on each arm, while he continued to struggle and shout about betrayal and lies and stolen futures. People were filming with their phones, and I knew this would probably end up on social media within hours. Someone's private pain turned into public entertainment, another relationship destroyed in full view of strangers who would judge and comment without knowing the full story. The elderly woman who'd spoken up earlier touched my shoulder gently. "Honey, are you all right? That was quite frightening. Do you need someone to walk you to your car?" Her voice was soft and concerned, reminding me of my own grandmother. I realized that through the having nothing. I pulled up finally. She walked. I thanked her profusely, but assured her I'd be fine. Though I sat in my car for another 5 minutes after she left, trying to stop shaking enough to drive safely. The drive back to the hospital was a blur. My mind kept replaying Marcus's face when he saw the name, the sound his fist made hitting the wall, the raw pain in his voice when he screamed about Emma still being in love with Jackson. Or Jackson. However she'd spelled it, the intent was clear. She'd named their daughter after a dead man, and in doing so, had probably destroyed her marriage beyond repair. I found Emma sitting up in bed, holding the baby and looking out the window. She didn't turn when I came in, but I could see her reflection in the glass, and her face was streaked with tears. "He came to the courthouse," I said unnecessarily. She nodded slowly. "I know. Hospital security already called. They've restricted his access. He can't come into the maternity ward without supervision now." Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she'd used up all her feelings and had none left. "Emma," I started, not sure what I wanted to say. "Why? Why would you name her after Jackson? You had to know what that would do to Marcus." She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes were so full of pain it took my breath away. "You want to know the truth, Sarah? The whole ugly truth?" I sat down in the visitor's chair, the same one I'd occupied just a few hours earlier when this had all started. The baby was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her name had just blown up her parents' life. "Marcus knew about Jackson when we got married," Emma began, her voice stronger now. "He knew I'd loved him, knew how destroyed I was when he died. He promised he understood, promised he'd help me heal. For a while he did. He was patient and kind and everything I needed." She shifted the baby to her other arm, wincing at the movement. Her C-section incision was still fresh, still painful. But after the first miscarriage, something changed. He became obsessed with the idea that I was being punished for still loving Jackson. He said God was denying us children because I hadn't fully committed to our marriage. He wanted me to throw away everything that reminded me of Jackson. Photos, letters, even a necklace Jackson had given me for my birthday years ago. "I did it," she continued, tears flowing freely now. "I threw it all away because I wanted to save my marriage and have a family. But it was never enough for Marcus. After the second miscarriage, he became convinced that I was somehow willing it to happen because I didn't want to have his children. He monitored everything I did, everywhere I went. He put tracking apps on my phone. He timed my trips to the grocery store. He accused me of visiting Jackson's grave when I was really at my doctor's appointments." The baby stirred in her sleep, making small sucking motions with her lips. Emma looked down at her with such tenderness it made my heart hurt. When I finally got pregnant with her and made it past the first trimester, I thought things would get better, but they got worse. Marcus became convinced that the baby wasn't his, that I'd somehow been unfaithful. He demanded a prenatal paternity test. Do you know how humiliating that was? Having to prove to my own husband that I hadn't cheated on him? I reached out and took her hand, feeling the weight of everything she'd been carrying. The test proved she was his, of course, but the damage was done. Every time he talked about the baby, it was with this possessive edge. My daughter. Never. our daughter. He planned every detail of her life before she was even born. What she'd wear, where she'd go to school, what activities she'd do. When I suggested anything different from his vision, he'd bring up Jackson again, say I was trying to sabotage our family because I couldn't let go of the past. So yes, Emma said, meeting my eyes with a defiant lift of her chin. I named her after Jackson, not because I'm still in love with him, but because I needed to do one thing. Make one choice that Marcus couldn't control. Jackson represented a time when I was free to make my own decisions, when someone loved me without trying to own me. And maybe that's petty and cruel and will damage my daughter, but in that moment, filling out that birth certificate, it felt like the only way I could breathe. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her confession hanging between us. The baby opened her eyes, revealing deep blue that would probably change color in the coming months, and made a small cooing sound. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Emma shrugged, a gesture that looked painful given her condition. "Now we get divorced, I suppose. Marcus will fight for custody. He'll use the name against me, say it proves I'm unstable. His family has money for good lawyers. I'll probably end up with supervised visitation of my own daughter while he raises her to believe her mother is crazy." "That's not going to happen," I said firmly, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "You have friends, Emma. You have support. We'll help you fight this." She gave me a sad smile. "You can't fight someone like Marcus, Sarah. He documents everything, plans for every contingency. He probably recorded our entire conversation at the hospital this morning. He's been building a case against me since the day Jackson died, whether he realized it or not." A knock at the door interrupted us, and a nurse came in to check Emma's vitals and the baby's feeding schedule. She was professionally cheerful, either not knowing about the morning's drama or politely ignoring it. After she left, Emma asked me to hold the baby while she adjusted her position in the bed. The little girl was lighter than I expected, fragile and perfect in my arms. "Her name is Jackson," Emma said quietly. Jackson. I thought spelling it differently would make it less obvious, less painful. Marcus would have figured it out eventually anyway. He figures everything out. That's what made him such a good software engineer and such a terrible husband. He couldn't accept that some things, like feelings, can't be debugged or optimized or controlled through careful planning. I handed the baby back carefully, watching as Emma settled her against her chest. "Are you safe?" I asked. "I mean, with Marcus restricted from the ward, but eventually you'll have to go home." Emma nodded slowly. "My sister is flying in from Denver tomorrow. She's going to stay with me for a few weeks. After that, well, we'll see. Maybe I'll move back to Denver to be closer to family. Marcus will hate that, losing control over where his daughter lives, but a lot of things are going to happen that Marcus hates." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my stomach clenched. It was from Marcus. "I'm sorry for what happened at the courthouse. I lost control. I need you to know that Emma isn't well. She hasn't been well since Jackson died. Please don't enable her delusions. Help me help her get the treatment she needs." I showed the text to Emma, who laughed bitterly. "See? He's already spinning the narrative. Poor Marcus, dealing with his mentally ill wife. He's probably texting everyone we know, building his case for why he should have full custody." Another knock at the door, and this time it was a man in a suit who introduced himself as a patient advocate. He explained that given the incident at the courthouse and Marcus's restricted access, the hospital wanted to make sure Emma understood her rights and had resources for domestic violence support. Emma listened politely, took the pamphlets he offered, and assured him she had family support coming. After he left, she looked at me with exhausted eyes. "I should probably talk to a lawyer too. This is going to get ugly, Sarah. You don't have to be part of it. You've already done more than enough, and I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of our mess." But I was already shaking my head. "I'm not," as I get all that. Emma said he filed. I went with, he wouldn't. She present Marcus, the judge. She also, after the, and this, that's not, I'll several. I drove Emma's. He looked as we drove, and now the track. She had to, Marcus, Patricia. Meanwhile, Kate and I, during one particularly bad night, around 3 a.m, Emma found me in the nursery. She'd kept the neutral gray and yellow theme, but removed anything with moons or stars, trying to soothe Jackson. "Maybe Marcus was right," she said from the doorway. "Maybe I am crazy. What kind of mother names her baby after an ex-boyfriend? What kind of person destroys their marriage over a name? I shifted Jackson to my other shoulder, her cries finally starting to quiet. A person who's been pushed too far, I said. A person who needed to reclaim some control over her own life. The name was just the catalyst, Emma. If it hadn't been that, it would have been something else eventually. You can't live under someone's thumb forever without something breaking. The Guardian ad litem's report, when it came, was surprisingly favorable to Emma. She noted that despite the controversial name choice, Emma was attentive to Jackson's needs, had a strong support system, and showed no signs of being unable to care for her child. She also noted that Marcus's fixation on the name seemed to override his focus on Jackson's well-being, and that his controlling behaviors during the marriage were concerning. The final custody hearing was scheduled for when Jackson was 3 months old. By then, Emma had physically healed from the C-section and was seeing a therapist to deal with everything that had happened. She'd also joined a support group for women leaving controlling relationships, which helped her realize that her experience wasn't unique or entirely her fault. Marcus, on the other hand, seemed to be spiraling. He'd been fired from his job after missing too much work for legal proceedings, and what his former colleague told Emma were emotional outbursts in the office. He'd moved back in with his parents and spent most of his time documenting what he saw as Emma's unfitness on a blog titled A Father's Fight for Justice. The blog posts were rambling and obsessive, focused more on Emma's betrayal than on Jackson's welfare. In court, Patricia presented a strong case for Emma retaining primary custody with Marcus having regular but unsupervised visitation. She argued that while the name choice was admittedly provocative, it didn't constitute abuse or neglect of the child. She pointed out that Emma had never prevented Marcus from seeing Jackson, had complied with all court orders, and had even offered to add Luna as a middle name in a gesture of compromise that Marcus had rejected. Marcus's lawyers argued that the name itself was a form of psychological abuse, that it would damage the child's relationship with her father and cause confusion about her identity. They brought in an expert witness who testified about the importance of names in child development, though on cross-examination, she admitted that many children with unusual or controversial names grew up perfectly well-adjusted. When it came time for Emma to testify, she was calm and composed in a way I'd never seen her before. She explained her marriage to Marcus, the slow erosion of her autonomy, the feeling of being suffocated by his need to control every aspect of their lives. She talked about Jackson briefly, acknowledging that she had loved him, but that he was part of her past. The name, she said, was chosen in a moment of pain and defiance that she now partially regretted, but she didn't believe it warranted losing custody of her daughter. If I could go back, she said, looking directly at Marcus for the first time in months, I would have left the marriage before getting pregnant. I would have recognized that love shouldn't feel like a cage. But I can't go back. All I can do is move forward and try to be the best mother I can be to Jackson, regardless of what her name is or how it came to be chosen. Marcus's testimony was harder to watch. He broke down multiple times, veering between anger and devastation. He talked about building the nursery, about his dreams for his daughter, about how Emma had destroyed everything with her obsession with a dead man. When asked about his plans for co-parenting, he struggled to articulate anything beyond wanting the name changed, and Emma punished for her betrayal. The judge took a week to make her decision. During that time, Emma barely slept, terrified that she would lose Jackson despite her lawyer's reassurances. She held her daughter constantly as if someone might snatch her away at any moment. I practically moved in, helping with feedings and diaper changes and trying to keep Emma's spirits up. When the decision came, it was more favorable than we dared hope. Emma retained primary physical custody, with Marcus getting alternating weekends and 1 evening per week, unsupervised, but with the stipulation that he continue therapy and attend co-parenting classes. The judge declined to order a name change, stating that while the choice was unfortunate given the circumstances, it didn't rise to the level of abuse, and changing it now would only cause more confusion for the child. The judge did, however, have sharp words for both parents. She told Emma that using a child's name as a weapon in marital disputes was immature and potentially harmful. She told Marcus that his controlling behaviors and inability to respect his wife's autonomy had contributed significantly to the marriage's breakdown, and that he needed to learn to separate his feelings about Emma from his relationship with his daughter. After the hearing, Marcus left without trying to speak to either of us. His mother stopped Emma briefly to say that she hoped they could all find a way to move forward for Jackson's sake. It was the first time anyone from Marcus's family had shown any empathy for Emma's position, and it made her cry all the way home. The first unsupervised visitation was terrifying for Emma. She packed Jackson's diaper bag obsessively, writing detailed instructions about feeding times and nap schedules as if Marcus hadn't been present for the first 3 months of his daughter's life. When he came to pick her up, they managed a civil exchange at the door, though neither could quite meet the other's eyes. Emma spent the entire 6 hours pacing and checking her phone, convinced something terrible would happen. But Jackson came back fed, clean, and content. Marcus had even sent photos during the visit. Jackson sleeping peacefully in a new crib he'd set up at his parents' house. There was no Luna nursery there, just simple, neutral decorations and the essentials for caring for a baby. It was progress, painful and slow, but progress nonetheless. As months passed, a fragile routine developed. Handoffs became less tense. Marcus stopped mentioning the name, though Emma told me he called Jackson sweetheart or little one rather than use it. Emma started seeing a therapist regularly and even began dating again when Jackson was about 8 months old, though she was cautious about introducing anyone to her daughter. The blog post stopped after Marcus's lawyer apparently explained how they could be used against him in any future custody modifications. He got a new job and moved into his own apartment, creating a proper space for Jackson's visits. Emma heard through mutual friends that he was seeing someone too, a woman from his therapy group who had her own complicated past. When Jackson turned 1, both parents attended her birthday party, held at a neutral location, a local park. It was awkward with their respective support teams keeping them on opposite sides of the pavilion, but they both focused on their daughter, who was oblivious to the tension as she smashed her fist into a pink frosted cake. For a moment, watching them both laugh at their daughter's antics, you could almost forget everything that had brought them to this point. Emma never did change Jackson's name, though she'd offered several times as a gesture of goodwill once the custody arrangement was stable. Marcus always declined, saying it would just confuse her now that she was starting to recognize it. Maybe he'd realized that the name was never really the issue, just the match that lit a fire that had been building for years. Or maybe he just didn't have the energy to fight anymore. Looking back now, 3 years later, I can see how that morning at the courthouse was both an ending and a beginning. It was the end of Emma and Marcus's marriage, the end of the illusion that love could overcome fundamental incompatibilities. But it was also the beginning of Emma reclaiming her autonomy, of both parents learning to put their daughter's needs above their own pain, of building something functional, if not happy, from the wreckage of their relationship. Jackson is a bright, cheerful toddler now, who knows nothing of the drama surrounding her name. She calls Emma Mama and Marcus Daddy, and seems well-adjusted despite shuttling between 2 homes. It tells me that sometimes, when Jackson does something particularly stubborn or defiant, Marcus will text her, "She gets that from you." It's become almost a joke between them, this acknowledgement that their daughter inherited both their strengths and their weaknesses. The name issue comes up occasionally, usually from well-meaning strangers who ask about its origin. Emma has developed a practiced response. "It's a family name," she says with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. And in a way, it's true. Jackson was part of her family of the heart, even if he never got to meet the little girl who bears a version of his name. Marcus has never fully forgiven Emma for the name choice, and Emma has never fully forgiven Marcus for the years of control. But they've learned to coexist, to co-parent, to put their daughter first, even when it's hard. They communicate through a parenting app now, keeping things businesslike and focused on Jackson's needs. It's not the family either of them envisioned, but it's the one they have. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Emma had chosen a different name, if she'd written Luna Marie Chen on that birth certificate instead. Would it have saved their marriage? Or would something else have eventually broken them? Marcus's need for control clashing inevitably with Emma's need for autonomy? I've come to believe it was always going to end, that the name was just the catalyst for an explosion that had been building pressure for years. I'm still close with Emma, though our friendship has changed. I'm Aunt Sarah to Jackson now, the one who reads her stories and takes her for ice cream when Emma needs a break. I've watched Emma rebuild her life, pursue her career, create a home that's truly hers. She's stronger now, more confident, though she still carries the scars of those years with Marcus. As for Marcus, I see him occasionally at handoffs or birthday parties. We're polite but distant, the shadow of that morning at the courthouse still between us. He seems calmer now, the therapy and time having worn down some of his sharper edges. He's a good father to Jackson, involved and loving, even if he can't bring himself to say her name. The last time I saw them all together was at Jackson's preschool graduation. She stood on the little stage in a tiny cap and gown, proudly announcing that her name was Jackson Marie Chen, when the teacher asked. I watched both her parents in that moment. Emma's small smile of vindication, Marcus's tight jaw and forced clap. 3 years later, and the name still stood between them, a permanent reminder of love, loss, control, and the desperate need to be free. But then Jackson spotted them in the audience and waved enthusiastically, shouting, "Mama, Daddy, I did it!" And for just a moment, both their faces transformed with pure love and pride for their daughter. Whatever pain her name caused them, whatever memories it triggered, she was worth it. She was worth everything. That's the thing about accidentally destroying a marriage. Sometimes it's not an accident at all. Sometimes it's the desperate act of someone trying to save themselves, even if they don't fully understand that's what they're doing at the time. Emma didn't set out to destroy her marriage when she wrote that name in purple ink. She was just trying to breathe, to make one choice that was hers alone. The destruction that followed was as much Marcus's doing as hers. His inability to loosen his grip, making the break inevitable and brutal. I still have the receipt from that day at the courthouse, tucked away in a drawer somewhere. A little slip of paper that marks the moment everything changed. Sometimes I look at it and remember the fear I felt when Marcus's fist hit that wall, the trembling in Emma's voice when she asked me to do her that favor. The weight of that envelope in my hands. That's my story of how I accidentally destroyed a marriage, though I've come to realize I was just the messenger. The marriage was already broken, held together by control and fear rather than love and trust. All I did was carry the proof of that brokenness to its official conclusion. In the end, perhaps that's what Emma needed. Not just someone to file paperwork, but a witness to the moment she chose herself over a marriage that was slowly suffocating her. These days, when young friends tell me about their relationship problems, about partners who track their phones or control their finances or make them feel small, I think about Emma and Marcus. I think about how love can become possession, how care can become control, how two people who once chose each other can become strangers locked in a battle over a child's name. And I tell them what I learned that day at the courthouse. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go, even if it means everything falls apart. Because from those pieces, if you're brave enough, you can build something new. Something that's truly yours. Something that lets you breathe. The ripple effects of that morning at the courthouse extended far beyond Emma and Marcus's immediate circle. Their story became a cautionary tale in our friend group, sparking conversations about boundaries, control, and what healthy love really looks like. Some couples grew stronger, recognizing warning signs in their own relationships and addressing them before they festered. Others realized they were already too far gone, that they were living their own versions of Emma and Marcus's story, just with different details. Emma's support group became a lifeline for her in ways she hadn't expected. The women there had stories that made hers seem almost mild by comparison. Physical abuse, financial control, isolation from family and friends. But they all shared that common thread of having their autonomy slowly stripped away until they barely recognized themselves. Emma told me that hearing their stories helped her understand that Marcus's behavior wasn't her fault, that she hadn't driven him to it by still having feelings about Jackson's death. One woman in the group, Linda, became a particularly close friend. She'd left her husband after 20 years when he'd hidden her car keys to prevent her from visiting her dying mother because he thought her family was a bad influence. Linda and Emma would meet for coffee after group sessions, their conversations ranging from the mundane challenges of single motherhood to the deeper work of reclaiming their identities. Linda was the first person Emma told when she started having feelings for someone new, a man named David she'd met at a pediatric first aid class. David was everything Marcus wasn't. Easygoing, secure in himself, respectful of boundaries. He was a single father too, widowed rather than divorced, raising twin boys who were a year older than Jackson. Their relationship progressed slowly, both of them cautious about introducing their children to new partners. It was 6 months before David met Jackson, and even then it was presented as a playdate with his boys rather than meeting mommy's boyfriend. Marcus's reaction to Emma dating was predictable, but still painful. He tried to use it against her in a custody modification hearing, arguing that she was exposing their daughter to potentially unstable relationships. The judge, the same one who'd overseen their original custody case, was not impressed. She reminded Marcus that Emma had waited an appropriate amount of time, had introduced David gradually, and that he had no grounds to dictate her romantic life as long as Jackson wasn't being harmed. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that Marcus had started dating first, though he'd been more secretive about it. His girlfriend, Patricia, not the lawyer, a different Patricia, was reportedly patient and understanding about his baggage. Emma heard through mutual friends that Patricia had insisted Marcus continue therapy as a condition of their relationship, which spoke well of her judgment. They kept their relationship away from Jackson for almost a year, which Emma respected even as it complicated scheduling. As Jackson grew older and more verbal, the name issue evolved in unexpected ways. She learned to write her name in preschool, proudly showing off the letters to both parents. Emma told me that Marcus finally said the name for the first time when Jackson directly asked him, "Daddy, why don't you ever say my name?" The question, innocent and heartbreaking, had apparently broken through whatever wall he'd built around that particular word. "You're right, sweetheart," he told her. Emma heard later from Jackson's chattery recap. "Your name is Jackson, and it's a strong name for a strong girl." It wasn't a complete healing, but it was progress. After that, he made an effort to use her name, though Emma said she could sometimes still hear the slight hesitation before he said it. The co-parenting app they used became a strange archive of their post-marriage relationship. Business-like exchanges about pickup times and doctor's appointments slowly evolved to include small moments of shared parenting joy. A video of Jackson's first successful bike ride without training wheels. A photo of her dressed as a dinosaur for Halloween. Brief exchanges about her fear of thunderstorms and how to help her cope. They were building something new, not friendship exactly, but a functional partnership focused on their daughter. Emma's therapy journey was transformative to watch. She worked through not just the marriage breakdown, but older patterns that had made her vulnerable to Marcus's control in the first place. She talked about her own parents' relationship, how her mother had always deferred to her father, how she'd internalized that as normal. She explored her grief over Jackson properly for the first time, separating the actual loss from what he'd come to represent. Freedom, autonomy, a time before everything became complicated. One day, about 2 years after the divorce, Emma made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She took Jackson to Jackson's grave. She'd never been before, too afraid of what it might trigger, too worried about Marcus's reaction if he found out. But with her therapist's support, she decided it was time. She told me about it afterward, how she'd explained to Jackson in simple terms that this was someone Mommy had cared about who had died, that his name was similar to hers, but she was her own person with her own story to write. Jackson, in the way of 4-year-olds, had been more interested in the flowers other people had left on nearby graves than in the existential weight of the moment. She'd asked a few questions, then wanted to know if they could get ice cream after. Emma said it was exactly what she needed. To see that Jackson's grave was just a place, that naming her daughter after him hadn't created some mystical connection or curse. It was just a name, chosen in a moment of pain that had taken on far more significance than it ever should have. She even told Marcus about the visit afterward through the app, bracing for an explosion that never came. His response was measured. "I appreciate you telling me. I hope it gave you closure." Maybe his therapy was working too, or maybe he was just too tired to fight anymore. Either way, it felt like another small step forward. The holidays were always complicated. That first Christmas after the separation, they'd tried to split the day, with disastrous results. Jackson, it wasn't perfect, but it reduced the chaos. Emma started new traditions for the years she had Jackson for Christmas. Christmas Eve pajamas, baking cookies for Santa, a special breakfast on Christmas morning. She said her mother finally came around after witnessing one of Marcus's controlled meltdowns during a visit, seeing for herself how he could turn a simple disagreement about Jackson's bedtime into a lecture about Emma's failures as a mother. Marcus's parents were more complicated. His mother especially struggled to accept the divorce. She'd write Emma long emails about the sanctity of marriage, about forgiveness, about thinking of Jackson's future. Emma would forward them to her lawyer, who advised her to respond politely but firmly that the divorce was final and the focus needed to be on successful co-parenting. Eventually, Marcus must have told his mother to stop because the emails ceased, replaced by stiff but civil interactions at Jackson's events. School presented new challenges. When Jackson started kindergarten, both parents wanted to be listed as the primary contact. The school, experienced in dealing with divorced parents, simply listed both with a note about the custody arrangement. Parent-teacher conferences were awkward at first, with both parents attending, but sitting as far apart as possible. By first grade, they'd learned to focus on Jackson's progress rather than their own discomfort, even managing to have productive discussions about her reading level and social development. There were still moments of pure, unexpected pain. Emma told me about finding one of Jackson's baby books while cleaning, the one Marcus had started when they first learned they were pregnant. His careful handwriting documented every milestone of the pregnancy, every ultrasound, every plan for their future. The entries stopped abruptly the day before Jackson was born. The rest of the page is blank. She'd sat on her bedroom floor and cried for an hour. mourning not just the marriage, but the family they'd both wanted so desperately. Dating while co parenting brought its own challenges. David was understanding about the complicated dynamics, but there were still moments of tension. The first time Marcus and David met at a school event, everyone held their breath. But both men managed to be civil, shaking hands and making small talk about the unseasonably warm weather. Jackson, oblivious to the undercurrents, had dragged both of them to see her artwork displayed in the hallway, chattering about the butterfly she'd painted. As I reflect on all of this now, 5 years after that morning at the courthouse, I'm struck by how much has changed and how much remains the same. Emma and Marcus will never be friends, probably never even be truly comfortable around each other. The wound of the name, of what it represented, cut too deep for that. But they've learned to be parents together while apart, to put Jackson's needs first most of the time, to build separate lives that occasionally intersect in school hallways and soccer fields. Emma is getting married next spring. David proposed on a family vacation to the Outer Banks with all 3 kids present. Jackson will be a flower girl, alongside David's boys as ring bearers. She told Marcus through the app, formal and factual, and his response was appropriately congratulatory. He's been with Patricia for 2 years now, and there are rumors they might be moving in together soon. Both of them are building new families around the skeleton of their old one. The name Jackson has taken on its own life now, separate from its origins. She's not Jackson reborn or a symbol of Emma's rebellion. She's just Jackson, a bright, funny, occasionally stubborn little girl who loves dinosaurs and hates broccoli and insists on wearing her favorite purple dress at least twice a week. She has her mother's artistic eye and her father's analytical mind, Emma's stubborn streak and Marcus's perfectionism. She is entirely herself, more than the sum of her parents' failed marriage. Sometimes I wonder what I would have done differently if I could go back to that morning. Would I have refused Emma's request, insisted she and Marcus work it out together? Would I have warned Marcus somehow? Tried to broker peace before war was declared? But I always come to the same conclusion. There was no good outcome that day. The marriage was already broken. I just happened to be holding the hammer when it finally shattered. The last time I saw them all together was at Jackson's kindergarten graduation. She stood on that little stage, proud and confident, spelling out her name for the audience with careful precision. Jaxon, she announced, beaming. My mommy picked it special just for me. In the audience, I saw Emma's small smile and Marcus's tight nod, both of them choosing in that moment to let their daughter own her story, to make her name mean what she wanted it to mean. That's the thing about accidentally destroying a marriage. Sometimes it's the only way to save the people trapped inside it. Emma and Marcus were slowly suffocating each other. Their love turned toxic by control and resentment. The name was just the spark that set it all ablaze. And from those ashes, they've each built something new. Not better necessarily, but healthier. More honest, more free. I still have lunch with Emma every few weeks. We talk about normal things now. Work, relationships, the challenges of raising a strong-willed daughter. The drama of those early days feels like a lifetime ago, though we both carry the scars. She thanked me recently, out of nowhere, for being there that day at the courthouse, for not backing down when Marcus confronted me, for carrying through with what she needed even when it got scary. You didn't destroy my marriage, she told me over Vietnamese food at our favorite lunch spot. You helped me save myself, and in the end, you helped save Marcus too, even if he'll never see it that way. We were going to implode eventually. At least this way, we imploded while Jackson was too young to remember the worst of it. And maybe that's the best we can hope for when love goes wrong. To minimize the collateral damage. To protect the innocent. To find a way forward even when the path is littered with broken glass. Emma and Marcus will never have the family they dreamed of when they painted that nursery with stars and moons. But they each have Jackson, and she has both of them. And somehow, imperfectly and painfully, they've made it work. As I finish writing this story, I realize it's not really about how I accidentally destroyed a marriage. It's about how sometimes destruction is necessary for new growth. How sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go. How sometimes a name is just a name, and sometimes it's everything. Most of all, it's about how even the messiest endings can lead to new beginnings if you're brave enough to keep moving forward. That's the story of Emma and Marcus and little Jackson with her controversial name. It's a story of control and rebellion, of love turned sour, of two people who brought out the worst in each other finally learning to be their best selves apart. It's not a happy ending in the traditional sense, but it's a real one. And sometimes that's enough.